Welcome to the Sci-Fi Continuum. I'm Stan, your narrator. Make sure you subscribe to our channel for more stories. Captain John Canson ran a tight ship. A seasoned interstellar hauler with a reputation for efficiency, he didn't tolerate nonsense, inefficiency, or surprises. His ship, the Mercury's Gambit, was a sleek, heavily modified freighter that carried everything from luxury imports to classified government tech across the stars. It was just another routine cargo run, until it wasn't. John stood on the bridge, arms crossed over his broad chest, watching the cargo manifest scroll across the holoscreen. Everything was in order, except for one unmarked crate. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, narrowing his sharp green eyes. His first officer, a lanky man with a perpetually nervous expression, cleared his throat. It just showed up on the manifest, sir. No sender ID, no destination. We were going to check it once we hit orbit, but, well, it sort of checked itself." A loud crack echoed through the hold. Over the ship's internal cameras, they saw the crate burst open. Packing foam exploded in every direction, revealing something or someone inside. John blinked. Is that a woman? Not just any woman. A stunning alien female unfurled herself from the crate, shaking off remnants of foam like a goddess emerging from a cosmic gift box. Her skin shimmered a deep cerulean blue, smooth and flawless. Cascading golden hair spilled in waves down her back, and her eyes glowed an ethereal silver. Most notably, she was draped in an elaborate shimmering gown that left very little to the imagination. Tight, translucent fabric hugged her curves, embroidered with swirling alien patterns of gold and pearl. She beamed at the camera, her full lips parting in a delighted smile. "Ah, my beloved." John's stomach dropped. Oh no. Before he could issue a command, she was already striding toward the bridge with unsettling confidence. The airlock doors slid open, and there she was, standing before him in all her radiant, bridal glory. The room went silent. John took a slow breath. "All right. Someone explain why I suddenly have a mail-order space bride in my cargo hold." The woman clasped her hands together, eyes shimmering with joy. "I am Zilnara, and you are my fated husband." John winced. "That's gonna be a no from me." "Oh, but it is written in the stars," she continued, undeterred. "My people, the Glivani, have long admired human men. It is our sacred tradition. If we wish to wed, we must stow away upon the ship of our destined mate and present ourselves in our finest bridal attire. If he accepts, we are bound for life." His crew exchanged bewildered glances. John pinched the bridge of his nose. "Let me get this straight. You hid in my cargo hold because some alien horoscope told you I was your soulmate." Zilnara giggled, tilting her head. "We do not rely on horoscopes. The Oracle of Veani herself foretold it. I would stow away on a mighty ship and emerge before my destined love, and he would be—" She gestured toward him, her cheeks flushing a deeper shade of blue. "A strong, handsome human captain, with fierce eyes and a commanding presence." John gave her a flat look. "That's oddly specific. You fit the prophecy perfectly." He exhaled sharply. "Look, sweetheart, I don't know what backwater planet you're from, but this is kidnapping. You kidnapped yourself. Do you even know how much trouble this is going to cause?" She gasped, placing a delicate hand over her chest. "Are you rejecting me?" Her lower lip trembled, and damn it, she actually looked heartbroken. John felt his crew's collective gaze burning into him. His mechanic, Kess, coughed. Cap? Hate to interrupt your little romance crisis, but we might have a problem." John turned toward the comms panel. Multiple emergency transmissions were coming through. Ship captains across the sector were all reporting the same thing. Alien women, bridal gowns, stowing away in cargo holds. Galactic chaos had just begun. The next few days aboard the Mercury's Gambit were chaotic, to say the least. John had hoped that with a few stern words and some firm no's, Zilnara would pack up and leave. But much to his dismay, she was an oddly tenacious stowaway. No matter how many times he told her to get back in the cargo hold and stay out of the way, She always found a reason to be involved. At first, it had been the usual, frustratingly odd alien customs. Zilnara would interrupt his work in the control room, asking questions about the ship, about Earth culture, about human customs. Each time, John had to remind himself that she was a product of her bizarre traditions and wasn't entirely to blame for the utter nonsense she was spewing. But as days passed, he started to notice something strange. She was helpful, surprisingly so. When a radiation leak occurred in one of the secondary engines, it was Zilnara who had immediately sprung into action, not only suggesting a solution, but guiding the crew through the repair process like she'd been working on ships her whole life. John had stared at her in awe, temporarily forgetting that she was supposed to be his bride. "Where did you learn that?" he'd asked, trying to hide his surprise. "I may be Glavani," she had said with a wink, "but I've read enough intergalactic manuals to know how a ship runs." She smiled at him as she handed over the final tool, her expression warm, genuine. "Besides, you seem like a man who knows his way around machines." John didn't know how to respond to that. Normally, he'd laugh it off, but this time, it hit a little differently. As the Gambit continued its run to Terra Nova, the media frenzy surrounding the alien bride phenomenon escalated. News cameras flooded every communication channel. Every ship across the sector was being followed by galactic reporters, demanding answers. To avoid a diplomatic disaster, John had reluctantly agreed to a public engagement with Zilnara, much to his own annoyance. It was supposed to be a joke, a way to calm the masses. But as the days dragged on, he found himself growing more and more uncomfortable with the situation. "Okay, Zilnara, let's talk," John said one evening, sitting across from her at the galley table, trying to sound stern. "About the engagement?" she asked eagerly, her large green eyes bright and full of hope. "No," John grumbled. "About you getting your own damn quarters. You're living in the mess hall at the moment, and I'm running out of excuses for why you're here." Her face fell for a split second before her usual cheery demeanor returned. "I thought maybe I could stay in the pilot's cabin. You know, where you sleep?" John blinked, utterly taken aback by her suggestion. "What? No! No way, that's—" "I'll behave, promise," she interrupted quickly, leaning forward with a playful glint in her eye. "I can even help you with the navigation charts. We could, I don't know, work together." She grinned mischievously. "Maybe get a little closer." John couldn't help but let out a laugh, despite himself. "You're something else, aren't you?" He shook his head. Fine, stay in the cabin, but stay out of my way." Zilnara gave a small squeal of happiness before jumping up to hug him. For a split second, John stiffened, surprised at the sudden affection. But as she pulled back, looking at him with genuine warmth, he felt an unfamiliar twinge in his chest. For the first time in days, John allowed himself to see past the crazy alien bride act. There was more to her than just an unwanted passenger on his ship. She was smart, resourceful, and, oddly charming. He had to admit, even if he wasn't ready to acknowledge it, he kind of enjoyed her company, more than he had enjoyed anyone's in a while. Later that evening, John found himself alone in the cockpit, trying to focus on the incoming data streams from Terra Nova. But his mind kept wandering back to the woman in the cabin. What was it about her? There was a subtle grace in the way she moved, a quiet intelligence in the way she spoke. He'd seen a lot of women in his life, but none like her. She wasn't just an alien. She was real. A woman, despite the strange customs, who wasn't afraid to be herself. John rubbed his temples, trying to shake the thoughts. He'd been through enough drama with women in his time to know better than to get wrapped up in something complicated. But this was different. "You're an idiot, Canson," he muttered under his breath. "This is supposed to be just a job." The comm suddenly buzzed to life, interrupting his moment of self-reflection. "Captain, we have a problem." Kendrick's voice crackled through the speaker. "There's another ship, just ahead. It's been hijacked by space pirates." John's instincts kicked in immediately. "We need to help them. Full speed ahead, Kendrick. Get the crew ready. As he stood up and ran to the back of the ship to prepare for what was sure to be another hellish encounter with pirates, he caught a glimpse of Zilnara, who was already at the ready, holding a blaster with surprising skill. "Need a hand?" she asked, a grin tugging at the corners of her lips. John couldn't help but grin back. "I think you're the one who's going to save us this time, not me." Zilnara laughed, her voice a melody in the chaos of the moment. "I told you I could be useful." Hours later, after the pirate attack had been thwarted thanks to Zilnara's quick thinking, John found himself pacing in his cabin, adrenaline still buzzing through his veins. He didn't want to admit it. Hell, he barely understood it himself, but he couldn't stop thinking about how she had been by his side, in the thick of it all, ready to fight. John sat down at the edge of his bed, his mind racing. It wasn't just about the damn cargo or the crazy alien bride anymore. It was something else, something he wasn't quite ready to face. But there was no escaping it now. Zilnara had wormed her way into his life, and for the first time, he wasn't sure if he wanted her to leave. The night was quiet, save for the soft hum of the ship's engines. John stood by the viewport, gazing out at the stars. The turmoil of the last few days seemed so distant now, replaced by a strange sense of peace that he couldn't shake. He glanced over his shoulder where Zilnara stood, her radiant presence filling the room with an energy he hadn't known he needed. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, turning to face her. "You're not what I expected?" She smiled, that mischievous glint in her eyes. "What did you expect, Captain?" "Someone who'd vanish into space the moment I told her to leave," he muttered, his tone less harsh than before. "Well, I'm not going anywhere," she said, her voice low, playful. "Not when I have you." John swallowed, his heart doing an unexpected flutter. There it was again, that tug he'd been trying to ignore. He had tried to keep things simple, to maintain control, but somewhere between the chaos and the craziness of it all, he'd begun to care. Maybe more than he should. She closed the gap between them, her fingers brushing against his chest. "You know, I never thought I'd meet someone like you," she whispered. "I thought my fate was sealed with someone else, but maybe fate was just waiting for this." Her words, her touch sent a wave of heat through his body. He stepped closer, meeting her gaze. He could see it now, the woman behind the wedding gown. The one who had fought alongside him, shared his struggles, and made him laugh when he needed it most. With a soft but firm hand, he cupped her cheek, leaning in. She didn't hesitate. Their lips met, a kiss that started slow and gentle, then grew more insistent, like two forces finally surrendering to one another. She kissed him back with all the same intensity, her hands threading through his hair, pulling him closer. They didn't say anything more. Words weren't necessary. The silence was filled with everything they hadn't admitted, everything that had been simmering beneath the surface for days. As they moved toward the bed, their bodies came together in a perfect synchrony, as if the universe itself had decided that this moment, this connection, was meant to be. There were no awkward pauses, no hesitations, only the rhythm of their desire. It was a moment of release, of raw emotion and quiet passion, as they discovered each other in ways that were deeper than the surface. The warm, flickering light of the cabin seemed to dance around them, a backdrop to the quiet intimacy they shared. Every touch, every kiss, was a promise, one that neither of them had expected, but both of them were more than willing to embrace. Hours later they lay together, tangled in the sheets, each of them savoring the comfort of the other's presence. For the first time since their bizarre journey began, John didn't feel the need to control everything. He didn't need to keep his guard up. And as Zilnara rested her head on his chest, breathing softly, he realized that maybe, just maybe, he was no longer trying to fight the inevitable. The next morning, the Mercury's gambit was in orbit around Terra Nova, and the media circus was in full swing. News outlets, galactic reporters, and curious onlookers had gathered in droves, eager to witness the biggest interspecies wedding in history. But even as the media frenzy buzzed around them, John couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. He had come to terms with it, the wedding, the unexpected bride, and everything that had happened in the last few weeks. John and Zilnara had talked it through, and despite his initial reluctance, John had realized he couldn't keep running from what had become clear. The woman beside him wasn't just a strange alien with a bizarre tradition. She was someone he could care about, someone he wanted to build a future with, no matter how wild that future might be. As the door to the makeshift ceremony room opened, John stepped in, wearing his best attempt at looking put together in front of the crowd. He'd gotten used to the media attention by now, but it still felt surreal. Zilnara was already standing at the altar, her wedding dress more stunning than ever, her face alight with happiness. Her green eyes locked with his, and for a brief moment the madness of it all melted away. There was only them. The ceremony was a mess, as expected. Reporters bumping into each other, cameras flashing, and a small army of galactic dignitaries trying to make their voices heard. But in the middle of it all, John and Zilnara exchanged vows. There were no grand speeches, no rehearsed lines, just honest words. "I wasn't sure about this," John said, his voice steady but his heart pounding. "But here I am, and I choose you, no matter what." Zilnara's smile was radiant, and she took his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I didn't expect this either, but sometimes fate has a way of leading us exactly where we need to be." As the officiant spoke the final words, John felt a strange sense of peace settle in his chest. It was official. He was married, to an alien. And oddly enough, it felt right. The reception was a blur of dancing, music, and far too much champagne. The Gambit's crew, including Kendrick and the rest, celebrated in their own awkward way, giving their captain plenty of ribbing about the whole alien bride thing. But even Kendrick, usually so stoic, gave Zilnara a hearty pat on the back. "Didn't think you'd get him, but here we are," he said with a wink. John rolled his eyes, but inside he was happier than he had ever been. Despite the chaos, despite the absurdity, this had turned out to be exactly what he needed. As the night wore on, the Gambit prepared to leave Terra Nova for its next mission. The crew gathered in the common area, joking around and teasing John. "So, Captain," Kendrick grinned, "any plans for the honeymoon?" John just shook his head. "With my luck, the next crate we open will probably be another bride." Zilnara, sitting next to him, raised an eyebrow with a sly smirk. "Or maybe a whole fleet of them," she teased. John groaned, leaning back in his seat as everyone erupted into laughter. "Please, no more crates, I can't handle any more surprises." But as they all laughed, there was one final sound, a rattle, a distant creak, from the cargo hold. John froze. The crew did too. Zilnara smirked at him. "Looks like we have company." John closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. No more crates.